Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
2, 1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower clear. Here we go.
But other sightings apparently were taken more seriously.
And one in particular, an incident called the Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell. This was in 1980, shortly after Christmas, when a few American airmen who were stationed in the UK reported seeing a UFO.
A huge, solid, diamond-shaped object they described as 100 foot long, hovering silently in the sky above them.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
Understands UFOs are real. This is a technology that is so far beyond anything that we have.
Reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, appear to demonstrate advanced technology.
Arrow is the culmination of decades of DoD, intelligence community, and congressionally directed efforts to successfully resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military.
Really, the purpose of this briefing is to elicit conversation, just get people talking and understanding the methodologies and kind of take away the mystery of how we've been doing things. So there's really, I've talked about the 5 pillars of UAP engagement. And very much like this picture here, when you're building these pillars, you really want to be consistent and build them roughly at the same rate and the same time, because if one pillar gets higher than another, then you wind up having a crooked roof. So we really have been very diligent in making sure that these 5 pillars all rise collectively together. And by the way, there may be other pillars as we move into the future. So I have this slide up here just to provoke conversation. What I usually tell folks is, let me see if I can hide this. Give me 1 second. Does that work? Nope. I'm sorry, guys. Let's try that again.
It's all good, man. Just don't show your calendar.
Yeah. So, the question always everybody asks, right? What is disclosure? And I think it's important in order for us to have a conversation, we really all need to come to agreement of what it means. Now, this is a definition that I was able to find: the action of making new or secret information known. Pretty simple, actually. Not too complicated. And we'll get back to that question. So the pillar 1 is the first pillar of engagement is legislative engagement. Here in our country, we have 3 branches of government. There is the legislative branch, the executive branch, and then there is the judicial branch. We chose a legislative branch for a reason, because these are the folks that set the laws of the land, and they're also the ones that fund the government. They're the ones who set the budgets. So it's important that as we ensure we speak about this topic, that we engage our lawmakers. Now, let me just preface: we're not lobbying. People say, "Oh, are you lobbying? You're lobbyists." No, we're not. We're not asking for a cent, not one red penny. What we're doing is just making sure that members of Congress are informed. So you see here some of the advantages, why we do what we do: ensuring lawmakers in the U.S. are provided relevant, accurate UAP information by qualified experts. What's a qualified expert? Now, this is not intended to hurt anybody's feelings, but in government terms, it's people who hold a security clearance, who have a very specific job, and they are a qualified expert in their field. So whether it's missile telemetry or radar exploitation or fill in the blank, that is a qualified expert. It's not a hobbyist. It's not a ufologist. It's really someone who's getting paid by the U.S. government to do a very specific job. Now, I know some people are going to argue that and say, well, but that's not really a qualified expert. Well, but it is in government terms. I'm not saying it is from a universal perspective, simply from a governmental perspective. Yeah. And so we make sure that those briefings, we facilitate those briefings so they can occur. We also, it facilitates educated decisions to properly fund UAP efforts within the U.S. government. And so you see here annual budget cycles. MIP and NIP stand for Military Intelligence Program, and NIP stands for National Intelligence Program, making sure that Congress knows that if you want to help out, that's where you put some of the money. So now you can get the intelligence community engaged to start actually looking at this this effort, if you will, this problem collectively. It also allows for better oversight and decreases excessive secrecy. So Congress says, you know what, I want a 180-day report. So they get a 180-day report. They said, hey, that's great, but now I want a 90-day report. And oh, by the way, I want a report from the Secretary of Defense every year, right? So it becomes a snowball effect. And you see here the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Armed Services Committee. It also permits dialogue between constituents and elected officials. So now when a constituent calls and says to their elected official, have you been briefed? They can say yes. And you know what? You're right. This is an important topic for us. And it's an important topic for our district or our state. It also promotes media acceptance, because now the media feels enjoined to actually ask the question that they never wanted to ask before. And that is asking our members of Congress, what do you think about UFOs? Right. And then, of course, it enables international dialogue with other governments, specifically through their legislative processes. So their Congresses, their parliaments, committees, et cetera. So these are just some of the reasons why Pillar 1 is so important.
Yeah.
Pillar 2 is
sorry, I was going to say that last point on Pillar 1 with other governments. I mean,
it does.
Every time that stands out. I think about the UK, though, how we still seem to be falling behind.
Well, I get it. We have to have patience. We have to. You can lead a horse to water, right? But you can't make it drink.
Absolutely.
So we have to, just continue, be persistent, and be fair-minded and rational about this topic. I think ultimately logic will prevail. The next pillar is executive level engagement. And this helps ensure that the bureaucracy, who's designed to execute the will of Congress, can do so. And they understand what those wants of Congress are, and then basically provide deliverables. It also allows for the defense and the intelligence communities to prioritize UAP data collection. Now, by the way, as you see, it's no longer just going to be defense and intelligence communities. We're beginning to open the aperture, but that's where we've been focusing on for the last 3.5 years. And as you see, as a result of that, you have a Deputy Secretary of Defense memo creating a strategic plan, literally on the heels of the 180-day report. But it also enables intra and inter-government efforts to be coordinated. So it's not just across federal agencies, but it's also up and down. And it also includes organizations not typically maybe included in the UAP conversation, like Department of Energy, like NASA potentially, like FAA. So
DHS,
NOAA. Excellent. You're right. You must have read these slides already. It also encourages resources and time investment, because now they know that the will of Congress is such, and therefore, the executive department could say, okay, we're going to take this seriously. It also helps eliminate stovepipes of previous UAP efforts. So, for example, like the UAP Task Force and ATIP, my program, and even OSAP to some degree, really suffered from stovepipes. You had this office that was squirreled away under a directorate, that was squirreled away under an undersecretary, that was squirreled away under a department, squirreled away, right? And so none of these organizations really shared information very well with each other. And there wasn't any senior level oversight. Now it says, you see this last bullet here, ensures proper oversight of UAP activities. Now you have the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense directly now involved and on the line of responsibility for this topic. So executive level engagement is important. The next is international engagement. And this is something near and dear, I think, to all of our hearts. But this helps us synchronize U.S. efforts with other nations. Japan is an example where about 9 months ago, they came out and they said, we'd like to enter into a bilateral information sharing relationship with the United States regarding UFOs, UAP. There's other countries as well, but they haven't they don't want to go public yet, so you don't see them in this slide. Sure. It also helps establish new opportunities for intelligence information sharing of UAP data, not necessarily with other countries, but international organizations such as NATO and the United Nations, and our Five Eye relationship that we cherish so much with the UK and Australia and Canada and some of these other countries. Sure. It also removes individual burdens of a nation and leverages partnerships to share the responsibility, right? So what do I mean by that? It's no longer one country having to pay the bill for all of this. We can all kind of pool our resources together. So NORAD is an example where you have a U.S. commander, but the deputy commander is Canadian. And so, when you bring the UAP topic to them, now it's really more of an international approach, not just a U.S. or one country approach, but also equally important, it minimizes one nation's ability to control the narrative. We've seen what happens in the last 70 years when we allow one country to control the narrative, and in essence, not a whole lot gets done. So really, this is very important. When you have an international conversation, then you truly have a collective conversation. It's not just one country that's managing the narrative. It also encourages joint research and development efforts and increased collaboration, which is very important, and helps maintain a common operating picture. That's kind of a military term, if you will, of the situation, while minimizing misunderstanding of adversarial provocations. Now, we know that these UAPs have interfered with U.S. nuclear capabilities and also Russian nuclear capabilities. What most people may not know, maybe some do, is that we actually have a communication with Russia over the northern part of our globe, our planet. And because when you launch nuclear missiles, you're going to launch them. The quickest way to get them to Russia and Russia to get them to us is over the North Pole. And so we have this agreement that if one of us happens to see something unusual over the North Pole, we can pick up the phone and call the other and say, hey, Boris, is that you? Or they can call us and say, hey, Joe, is that you guys? Or is this something else? Now, why is that important? Because we now know countries like India and Pakistan, who aren't necessarily friendly to each other, they both have nuclear capabilities. Can you imagine if a UFO were to be encountered potentially over one of their nuclear installations and it gets confused as some sort of provocation of war by the other side? I mean, that would be horrible. So it is important that we have this international engagement. Yeah. Pillar 4 is mainstream media engagement. This is why people see me on mainstream media a lot. And despite what people think, where I only do one type of media outlet, that's not true. I've done many outlets on both sides. But why is this important? Because it socializes the reality of UAP to a much broader audience. It also helps destigmatize the topic because now they're talking about it and they're reporting on it. It also further encourages legislative and executive branch involvement because when the mainstream media starts asking them hard questions, now they want answers. Now they're saying, you know what, I can't answer that question, but I'm going to poke somebody who can, and we're going to get back to you with some answers. It also provides data to massive information consumer base. Never before have we been able to take information across the planet so quickly in various different, if you will, media aggregators like Associated Press or Mother Jones or Comcast, where you could do a podcast today and it winds up being in a written article tomorrow and then later on in a broadcast the next day. And it could be virtually around the planet. Now, with that said, there's also some danger with that, right? Because there's an old saying that a lie will travel around the world in the time it takes for the truth to leave the front door. So it's important that we be aware of that and only provide valid, accurate information. It also creates positive pressure for scientific and academic communities. You now have academia asking folks like Dr. Avi Loeb, right? Hey, is this topic important, right? This is super, super important. It's helpful. It gives them an outlet, gives them an ability to have the conversation. It also increases government transparency, as we saw with the New York Times story, right? For years, if not decades, we've been saying, no, we don't look at UFOs. Oh, well, surprise, we do actually. And then, of course, it provides a platform for new theories because now people can talk to the media and new theories, and some of them may not necessarily follow a line of logic, but they're probably worth listening to anyways.
Yeah.
And then pillar 5 is public engagement. The most important, in my opinion, because it enables the public to take part of the UAP conversation. They see something on the nightly news, and now they're talking about it around the water cooler, maybe around the dinner table at night. This is important. It also allows for endorsement for the other 4 pillars. If the people say this is a topic that's important to them, the media will cover it, and our legislative members will begin to look at this, and same with our executive branch. So public engagement is probably the most important. It also bolsters the ability to fund and budget UAP studies in both government and the private sector, because now people say, you know what, this is important, and I'm willing to actually put some money behind this for us to try to figure this out one way or another. It creates a platform for grassroots enclaves to exist. Right now, you and I having this conversation, this is amazing. This is Twitter and social media. It facilitates a confederated effort and data crowdsourcing environment. Now we've got people who have cell phones in their hands, and YouTube is full of videos that we can all look at and collaborate and talk about. And then, of course, helps create new political platforms and agendas. Disclosure, I think, being potentially one of them. Now, those are the 5 pillars. What have those 5 pillars yielded since 2017? Of course, a lot of people say, yeah, not much has happened, in the last 3.5 years. Well, okay, let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute. We have DoD admitting the 3 videos are real. They admit that the videos depict unidentified aerial vehicles. The Department of Navy creates a UAP reporting policy and guidelines, and actual reporting guidelines and policies that get promulgated. DoD establishes an official UAP task force under the Deputy Secretary of Defense directly. Mainstream media takes notice and begins to actively report on these encounters. Members of Congress receive classified briefings. Members of Congress have taken lead in advocating for greater transparency. Former directors of national intelligence and CIA admit and are talking about UAPs. POTUS receives a classified briefing on at least 2 occasions. Our President of the United States, former President of the United States, publicly acknowledges the realities of UAPs, along with two former presidents of the United States publicly acknowledge the reality of UAPs. Congress mandates a 180-day report be submitted by the DoD and DNI. One of only 144 incidents in that 180-day report were resolved. Congress mandates a UAP report every 90 days. Japan requests a bilateral information sharing agreement with the U.S. China introduces the 5 Continents Initiative, and one of the largest IC collaborative virtual environments is created to analyze UAP data. Now, that's just since 2017. I would argue that probably more has been done in the last 3.5 years than in the last 3 decades. Now, by the way, when I say that, I'm not taking credit for it. A lot of people were part of this, okay? But that's yesterday. What about today? Well, here's what's going on today, folks. Senior academics in the U.S. are involved in the serious study of UAP phenomenon. Renowned universities in the U.S. are expressing interest in officially studying UAPs. Scientific enclaves are being created to test the physics. Scholarship programs focusing on UAP performance are being developed. Defense Intelligence University at DIA and the National Intelligence University are accepting theses on UAPs. That's remarkable that you have actually these academic institutions in our national security apparatus now accepting theses on UAPs. Data from previous U.S. projects are being consolidated under a single entity. U.S. Navy is filing patents on potential UAP propulsion technology. DoD is developing a strategic plan to study UAPs for years into the future. UAP information is being integrated into U.S. intelligence collection cycle. Certain allied nations are expressing interest in working with the U.S. government. The DoD IG is conducting an evaluation and several inquiries into DoD's handling of the UAP topic. Certain members of Congress have expressed desire for public hearings. Study of UAPs are being included into annual budget cycles, both MIP and NIP. Former senior members of the intelligence community are assisting with U.S. government efforts involving UAPs. Office of Director of National Intelligence, Office of the Secretary of Defense, Navy, Spacecom, NORAD, and other elements of the IC are actively working UAP issues and planning for state, local, and tribal authorities to integrate UAP data is underway. That is all what's happening right now behind the scenes as we speak. So if it wasn't enough, the last slide to talk about what's happened in the last 3.5 years, here's what's going on right now.